we'll be taking a look at inheritance and specificity. So inheritance controls styles that are applied or passed down to an element when no styles are directly declared on the element. So what do I mean? So let's go to our HTML file. We have the div as a parent, so let's give it a class parent. We have hello. We also have a span within span the class child. So you can see that we have a parent here. The parent is the div. We also have two child, the hello text and the span. So now let's apply a style on the parent. So we'll select the parent through the class name, parent dot, then we click color green. Can you see? So this is what inheritance means. So the span child, even though we didn't apply any style to it. I think we can close this. Let's close this. So even though we didn't apply any style to this span, it inherited the style of its parent. So that's what specificity is all about. So the color above that we apply to the parent is also applied to the span because it inherited it from the parent. So that's the computed value. So the value passed down from the parent to the child during inheritance. So inheritance is good because it helps avoid repetition of CSS rules, and they can be overridden For example, in this example now, we can decide to come here and say, okay, in as much as the child has inherited the color green from the parent, we want to override the color of the child now. So let's say color should be what? Blue. Can you see? So now because we've now applied the style directly to the child now has a color blue. Hello world. So the hello is green, the world is blue. So not all CSS properties can be inherited. Every element has its default value. So when they do not inherit properties from their parents and also have no CSS rules attached to them, they assume their initial value. For example, let's remove the style on the parent. The style also. So let's save this file. So this is the default value, the initial value, since no CSS rule is applied. So if you are to inspect and check your browser, you will see that they still have a style applied to them. So that's the default style that came with the browser. So look at you see your styles. So when you check the computed value, you can see that this span has certain style applied to it. Display, inline, height, auto, width, auto. If we decide to check the parent also, you can see it has a display block, height of 18.1818 pixel. It has a width also. Can you see? So these are the default style. Why? Because we didn't apply any style to it. So when we now apply a style to it now, it changes the initial value, their default value, to the style that we've applied to it. So let's take a look at another concept called cascading. So this refers to how CSS rules from different sources affect an element. It's quite different from inheritance because it has nothing to do with the DOM relationship. That means the parent-child relationship between elements. So CSS declaration can come from multiple sources, such as user agent. So the user agent is the browser default style, the one I just showed you now. Like when we inspect, let's inspect again. Let's look at the user agent style. Can you see? So this span is using the default browser style, which is a user agent style sheet. Can you see? So we also have the author style sheet. So these are style sheets written by author of a page, that is the developer, to define the look and feel. So in our own case now, every style we write in our style.css file is the author style sheet. So there's this also other one also, user style sheet. These are style written by the user of the page to customize the document to their taste. For example, I can decide to go to a particular page. Let's say let's say go to Instinct Hub. So when I come to Instinct Hub, I can decide to change the color of I can decide to inspect this and decide to change the color of this text. So I want to make it red. Can you see? So I'll be able to change the style to red now, even though this is not what the developer specified there, but I've been able to change it. But once I reload this page, it changes back to the author style sheet. That means the developer of this site, the style sheet the developer of this site wanted. So let's go back to our code sandbox. So what about the case where we have style sheet from different sources? We have the user agent style sheet, we have the author style sheet, we have the user style sheet. The browser will be confused, but there is a rule. There is a way the browser dictates or determines which style to apply from which source. So in case of clash in CSS declaration, the author style sheet takes precedence, and if there are multiple declarations from a particular element in the author style sheet, specificity is considered. So the author style sheet, that means the developer style sheet, takes precedence over any other style sheet, either the user agent, which is the browser style sheet this time around. So, but now within the author style sheet, that means within the developer style sheet now, if there are clashes, like you are styling, let's say for example, let me take this guy out. I have this span. Let me move it out. Okay, let me just leave it there. Let me apply a p tag to the hello. So I decided to style this class, this span. Apply multiple style to it. I use the element or type selector, just as we've talked about. I say color orange. Can you see? I decided to use the class name again. So the class name of that same span is what? Child. I decided to start it through the child name. Dot child. And the color brown. Save that. Let's save this also. So can you see? How come? To the span I applied the color orange. Through the class I applied a color brown, but it's not showing orange and brown at the same time. It's only showing the color brown. Why? The browser uses something called specificity to determine what style to apply. So now let's understand specificity. This is the mean by which a browser determines which style should be applied to a browser. It is a weighted point based on the number of selector type in the matching selector. Like how many selectors are here, then based on that selector, now if I hover this, you see the point, you see the weighted point that I mentioned. You can see selector specificity, we have 0, 1, 0. Can you see? So if I hover the span also now, you can see 0, 0, 1. So in this case now, the child selector has a higher specificity than the span. Can you see? So now let's try and understand it clear. Let's try and understand it clear. So now if I decide to do something like this also, okay, so the reason why this worked was not just because of specificity, because of cascading. Why? Because this child selector applied later in the document, in the declaration, in CSS declaration. So if I decide to move this away from here and put it here, so I think it's because of specificity. So the class has a higher specificity than this. So the class has a higher specificity. So if I decide to do something like this, if I want to make the span have a higher specificity, so what I can do is I can increase the number of selector type. So how do I do that? I can decide to do div span. So let's change this one to span. Let's remove the span. Let's remove child. So can you see? So div span has a higher specificity 2. This just has 1. 001. So let me remove this now. Let me remove the div. What do you think color will be now? Okay. So let me move this down so it can be below the first one. Can you see? Why? Because this second span appeared later in the style sheet. So the browser is going to use this declaration here. It won't use the first one. Why? Because this one is declared later in the style sheet. So to make this one powerful, we can increase the number of selector. Let's say div now. So the color is going to change to what? Color orange here. Why? Because this one has a higher specificity than this. So that's it. So now let's look at the point. Let's look at let's try and understand some things about specificity. So inline styles, that is, let me write span style equal to color blue. Inline styles have the highest specificity. They have a specificity of this. So they have higher specificity. Even if I come here and I say, okay, you can see this span also is within this div parent. Can you see? But despite the fact that I'm trying to change the color to brown here, the color is still what? It's still blue. Why? Because I specify the style on the tag itself. So this has a higher specificity than whatever I've written in this style sheet. So the next one is IDs. IDs have the next specificity, high specificity. So can decide to do ID equal to new span. Let's see, specificity. So if I come here, you can see that div span, can you see 002, it gave it a color of what? Orange. But now immediately I had selected by the ID, I do color red, it changes to red. Why? Because this has a higher specificity. Can you see? 100. So this specificity is higher than this 002. So let's look at the next one. The next one is class. So we looked at the next one, which is more of a class. So this class here. So let's bring that down. We have class here. So the class specificity has let me add their points. This has 100. This has 10. Can you see? It's not 100%. Let's just say something like this. So pseudo elements. Let's say pseudo elements. have a specificity of 1. Can you see? So let's say to this span here, to this span I have here, let me attach a class to it. Class pseudo. So let me look at this element. Pseudo dot pseudo before. Okay, it says pseudo elements will have 2 semicolon, color blue, content. Pseudo. Can you see? So it has a specificity of 1, so it's going to take on its own style. So let's remove the color here. Let's see what style is applied. You can see. So it takes on the style of what? Div span. But immediately we had its own color. It has a higher specificity than this. So let's highlight. You can see 0, 1, 1. So combining 2 selectors together will only make this last side 2. Why? Because we have 2 selectors. Do you understand? So basically what you need to understand is that inline elements have the highest specificity, followed by IDs, followed by class, and followed by pseudo elements. So joining 2 or more classes together increases the specificity of an element. So just like we selected an element here, we selected the span here. So let me remove the other ones so we don't confuse each other. So let me comment them out. So, even though I selected the span elements, I selected it through the tag, the span tag, to color brown. The color is not brown, even though it appeared later in the CSS sheet. In as much as I have joined 2 selectors together here, it has a higher specificity. What are the 2 selectors? I joined the parent and the child. Like the span is a child of this div. Can you see? Div span. The color is what? I changed the color to what? Brown. So I can decide to even use the class. So let's go by their classes. Let's say I made dot class. Dot child. Brown. Span. So the child, because I'm using a class, so I'm selecting the class, the child directly through this class name. So it will inherit this class, it will inherit this color, brown. So if I decide to say, okay, I decide to select the child twice, it will still inherit brown. Why? Because brown came later in the style sheet. If I move the brown up, it won't inherit the color brown anymore, it will inherit color orange now. Why? Because orange came later in the style sheet. Can you see? So let's return the brown back. So now, if I wanted to inherit brown again, what I need to do is I can now add one more selector to it so as to increase the specificity. So what I can do now is, okay, I can decide to go here. I can see that this span with the class child has a parent a div parent. So I can decide to say, okay, let me use the div. Let me add one more selector. I can either add the element selector, which is the div, and do this. So it increases specificity, then it adds this color brown to it. Or I can decide to use the class of the parent rather than using the element type tag. I can decide to do dot parent. Can you see? It still adds the color brown to it. So that's how to increase specificity.